Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, LEED 101. We have some brief housekeeping before we start. Your phones are on mute. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box in the corner of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end of today's session, time permitting, or via an email after. And you can always send questions to mapeidigital@mapei.com. And we also invite you to visit our health and environment pages on our website, www.mapei.com, where we have multiple pages full of the latest industry information, including helpful links and downloads. And these pages also happen to be overseen by today's speaker, MAPEI Corporation's Sustainability Manager, Brittany Storm. Brittany has a background as a sustainable building consultant and a background in construction. And this very unique combination allows her to speak to audiences about both the big picture as well as the technical aspects of a project. She's a LEED accredited professional, AP, with BD plus C and ID plus C specialties, as well as being a WELL AP and a Fitwel ambassador. In addition, she's active on many sustainability committees, and I'm always happy to welcome her back to the microphone. Brittany, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jen, and good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're listening in from. Thanks for attending today's sustainability webinar titled LEED 101. We have a lot to cram into this webinar, so let's get started. Today's learning objectives are, I'm going to give you an overview on LEED and its active versions, an overview of green product certifications that contribute to LEED and how MAPEI's products contribute, how to select products that contribute to LEED certification, and also how to fill out the LEED low emitting materials and building product disclosure and optimization calculators using MAPEI products and a couple other examples. LEED, for those of you who are not familiar, stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It was developed by U.S. Green Building Council. It includes a set of rating systems or typologies for the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of green buildings, homes, and neighborhoods, which aim to help building owners and operators be environmentally responsible and use resources efficiently. There are currently 3 active versions of LEED until this summer. Version 3, its sunset date is June 30th, 2022. Using our products or our product types as examples, as you're seeing here. So LEED version 1 through version 3 focused on using building products or materials with recycled content, low VOC content, and sourcing locally. LEED version 4 or 4.1 shifted a little bit. They now focus on using building products or materials with environmental product declarations, material ingredient reports, and more stringent VOC emission requirements. So for today's presentation, we will focus mainly on version 4.1 or V 4.1, as I will probably say throughout this webinar. As one, because V3 is wrapping up, so there's no point in talking about that one. You can no longer register for version 3 projects, and version 4 is active and used, but version 4 is a little bit easier than version 4.1 is a little easier than version 4, if that's not what I said. It's a little more streamlined in some of the credit categories, so that's why I'm going to use 4.1 today. LEED is for all building types and all building phases, including new construction, interior fit outs, operations and maintenance, and core and shell. The BD and C rating system is for new construction and major renovations. This includes new construction, core and shell, schools, retail, warehouses, healthcare, you name it. ID and C rating system is for complete interior fit out of projects. O&M stands for operations and maintenance. And this rating system is for existing buildings that are undergoing improvement work or little to no construction. So no major overhauls or major renovations being done under this rating system. Neighborhood for development is for new land development or redevelopment projects. There's also LEED for homes, which includes single family homes, low and mid-rise multifamily buildings. There's also LEED for cities and communities, which help local leaders or local governments create responsible, sustainable, and specific plans for natural systems, energy, water, waste, transportation, and other factors that contribute to quality of life. LEED also has a certification program, which is fairly new. Recertification helps project teams maintain and improve the building over time. This applies to all occupied and in-use projects that have previously achieved LEED, BD and C, or ID and C. And there's also another program not listed here called LEED Zero. It's available for all projects certified under LEED, BD and C, or O&M rating systems. It's a program for projects with net zero goals in carbon and or resources. There are 110 points distributed across 8 credit categories, and these are the 8 credit categories here. These categories are made up of prerequisites, which are mandatory, and credits, which are optional, but credits give you points. Each rating system is made up of a combination of credit categories. The integrative process category encourages cross-discipline collaboration. The location and transportation category covers the access to a variety of transportation and or credit for constrained sites. Materials and resources requires using sustainable materials and reducing waste. Water efficiency covers smart water and reuse of water where applicable. Energy and atmosphere is for the energy performance of a building. Sustainable sites minimizes the impact of the ecosystem and water resources, and then the indoor environment covers indoor air quality and access to natural light and views. There are 2 bonus categories in the LEED rating system. So there's innovation. So either pursuing something innovative or pursuing a LEED pilot credit or achieving a credit threshold that goes above and beyond what's stated in the reference guide, that's where you would get bonus points for those credits. Regional priority is, again, also a bonus category. It's based on geographical environmental priorities determined by LEED. So project teams enter their zip code and they're given regional priority credits in which they can achieve additional bonus points based on their zip code. This is a LEED version 4.1 BD and C checklist or scorecard. Project teams typically during DDs or design development phase or even schematics will conduct a LEED kickoff meeting or a charrette, and they go through each of these credits one by one and determine which is achievable, which might be achievable, and which credits are not possible. Ideally, the scorecard or a similar looking scorecard becomes the project team's guide throughout the LEED process. This is also a further breakdown of the credit categories that I just talked about. So here are the credit categories that we just discussed. And within each of these credit categories, there are specific prerequisites projects must satisfy and a variety of credits that are not highlighted that you can pursue to earn points. The prerequisites include a minimum threshold the project team has to achieve. So for example, let's see, indoor water use reduction in the column on the left towards the bottom. There is a minimum threshold for water use reduction. For the prerequisite, for example, you have to reduce water consumption by 20% from the baseline. In order to achieve certification, project teams are required to satisfy all prerequisites and earn a minimum number of points by pursuing additional credits. And here are the points that are associated with each of the credits. There are 110 points distributed across these credit categories. So using the water use reduction example again, the prerequisite requires reducing water usage by 20%, but there is a credit that's worth 6 points called indoor water use reduction as well. And you get 1 point for reducing water use by 25%, 2 points for 30%, and up to 6 points for reducing water usage by 50% from a baseline. I don't have a prerequisite example for MAPEI's product types, as there are currently no prerequisites or related prerequisites to products or material selection. However, I can point out here which credits MAPEI's products can contribute to. The materials and resources credit category, indoor environmental quality, and the innovation category. And we'll take a deeper dive into these categories over this webinar. MAPEI's products can contribute to over 12 points. Notice I did not say MAPEI's products achieve over 12 points. You will also notice that it takes a team to achieve LEED certification. It's not as simple as collecting materials from contractors or manufacturers and calling it a day. Products and materials make up a small percentage of the overall LEED certification process. Based on the number of points achieved, a product earns one of the 4 thresholds or certification thresholds. You need a minimum of 40 points to be considered LEED certified, 50 to be LEED silver, 60 for gold, and 80 or more points to be LEED platinum. It's also important to note building projects receive LEED certification. And again, that's based on the number of points that the project team achieves. Products cannot be LEED certified. There is no such thing as a LEED product. Green products can contribute to LEED certification, but selecting green products doesn't automatically allow the project team to achieve LEED certification. There's also no such thing as LEED certified people. There are accredited professionals or APs. There's also green associates and LEED fellows based on the person's experience and the exams that they've taken. Now we're going to take a deeper dive into LEED's MR and IAQ credits that are specific to MAPEI products. So the first credit that we're going to talk about is Materials and Resources, or MR credit for building life cycle impact reduction. The intent of this credit is to encourage adaptive reuse and optimize the environmental performance of products and materials. Option 1 is, if applicable, fairly easy to achieve. It just requires maintaining existing building structures and envelopes and interior non-structural elements of a building. Obviously, if you're not doing any of that, that option is not applicable, and therefore it is difficult to achieve. Option 2 is a little more tricky. This credit has gone through some significant changes since version 4 launched. Gone are the days when project teams simply provided recycled content, regional information, and VOC content, and as we did in older versions of LEED. As you'll see today, there's much more to LEED these days. Under option 2, someone on the project team would complete an LCA, or life cycle assessment, of a project and compare this to a similar baseline building to show improvements or reductions in 6 impact categories. And some of these impact categories are global warming potential or depletion of stratospheric ozone layer, and I'll talk about those more in a little bit. Manufacturers do not complete this LCA. Sorry, LCA stands for life cycle assessment. I apologize if I don't spell out what acronyms stand for. But the project team uses all available EPDs from all materials or products on the project site to complete a whole building LCA. And there's a special life cycle assessment calculator to complete this credit. In keeping with our commitment to sustainability, some of MAPEI's products have gone through a life cycle assessment, or LCA. These results are available on our environmental product declarations. Most of our EPDs are available on third-party LCA software sites, such as the EC3 tool, which project teams can use to create whole building life cycle assessments. And I will talk about LCAs and EPDs more in a few slides. Before we get started, there are two calculators that I will be using as examples in the remaining webinar. These can be found on LEED's credit library. So if you Google LEED credit library, it'll bring up each credit and what is required in each credit. It also has a guide on what to provide as far as documentation goes. They have resources, including these calculators, which project teams have to download and submit as part of LEED certification process. The next credit is the MR credit for Environmental Product Declarations, or EPDs. The intent of this credit is to encourage the use of products and materials for which life cycle information is available and that have environmentally, economically, and socially preferable life cycle impacts. And it also, the intent is to reward project teams for selecting products from manufacturers who have verified improved environmental life cycle impacts. The credit requirements state that the project team should use 20 different permanently installed products sourced from at least 5 different manufacturers. So I pulled this option 1 information from the reference guide. This is exactly how the reference guide asks for EPD information. I know it's a lot to interpret, and hopefully my notes on the side there make it a little bit more understanding. I've learned over the years to read between the lines and what LEED is asking for and pick out information. So hopefully that helps you today with how to find this information. So as I mentioned, the credit requires, this EPD credit requires that project teams use 20 different permanently installed products sourced from at least 5 different manufacturers. This does not mean that you get 20 points for 20 EPDs or 1 point for using a MAPEI EPD. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. You have to use 20 different permanently installed products from 5 different manufacturers to get 1 point. There are 3 different ways to get to document environmental product declarations. There are 3 different EPD types. There's product specific declaration, which is a product with a publicly available life cycle assessment. It has to conform to ISO 14044 and have a cradle to gate scope. There's industry-wide or generic EPDs, and these are products with third-party certification in which the manufacturer is recognized as a participant by the program operator. And there's also product-specific type 3 EPDs. It's a third-party certification, including internal and external verification, in which the manufacturer is explicitly recognized as the only participant on the EPD, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But first, LCA, or life cycle assessment. I've said that 100 times now, I'm sure. LCA is an approach that assesses the environmental impacts related to a product in a life cycle perspective. The product is not only evaluated on the basis of its end use, but also its life stages are taken into consideration. So starting from the extraction of the raw material with which the product is formulated, their transportation and subsequent transport to the production plant, the processing phases of the product in the factory and its packaging, transportation to the customer, the application, use, and maintenance, all until it reaches its end of life, where the product goes to the landfill or ideally can be recycled. An approach in which all phases of the product life are taken into consideration is called cradle to grave. And if the evaluation ends after the production phase, it's called cradle to gate. So using a specific calculation software, which takes into account the data relating to the product life stages, it's therefore possible to quantify the impacts that the product can have on the environment. Impacts include global warming potential, so how much heat a greenhouse gas traps in the atmosphere, photochemical ozone creation potential or the environmental impacts due to VOCs, eutrophication, pollution of aquatic ecosystems. I can go on and on about each of these impact categories. There are also impact categories. They're also the same impact categories that I talked about under the MR credit for building life cycle impact reduction. It's what they look at when they're completing a whole building life cycle analysis. They're looking at every applicable product's impact on the overall building. Currently, there are no baselines that a product or material has to be compared against when it comes to these environmental impacts. I wouldn't be surprised if that's required on the next version of LEED. Good, bad, or ugly, an EPD is a summary of LCA findings. So an EPD could have the worst possible impacts and would still contribute to this credit. All of the aforementioned LCA analysis is summed up in a report. It's also known as an Environmental Product Declaration, or EPD. EPDs quantify a product or material's impact on the environment from extraction of raw materials through the disposal of the product. Having an EPD does not imply that a declared product is environmentally superior to its alternatives, and pursuing EPD for products is voluntary, as are all of the sustainable attributes or certifications that we'll talk about today. I don't have an example of a product-specific declaration. However, the center image there is an example of an industry-wide EPD. You can tell it's an industry-wide EPD when more than one manufacturer is listed as a participant. And on the right, there is an example of a product-specific EPD, and you can tell it's product-specific as it's exclusive, in this case, to MAPEI and all of MAPEI's products listed there. So this fun spreadsheet is a LEED building product disclosure and optimization calculator, or BPDO. I probably will call it BPDO throughout this. It's required to be filled out as part of the LEED documentation requirements. It's not typical of contractors or subcontractors or manufacturers to complete these calculators. Typically, it's filled out by the LEED project manager, and that's LEED, LEED in this case, or a LEED project administrator or a LEED consultant. Typically, that's who fills these out. Here, you're seeing the EPD tab of the BPDO calculator. So in this example, we're seeing that there are 21 products listed in my example here. And under option 1 column in the center there, in this example, we've identified 15 products of the ones on the far left have an EPD. Not every product is going to have an EPD, and that's okay. Now, based on the types of EPDs and their weighted values that we talked about earlier, product-specific EPDs are worth 1 product. Industry-wide EPDs are worth 1 product. And if you have product-specific type 3 EPDs, they're worth 1.5 products. So the weighted number of products with EPDs in this case is 17. I hope that makes sense. So as part of the documentation you have to submit for LEED, you're required to fill out every single product or every applicable product that would fit on this spreadsheet in the column here. And LEED totals up the number of materials that you have in this column. So in our example here, we have 21. Of these 21, 15 of them, of the products or materials have an EPD. And then based on the type of EPD that that product has, they're worth a little bit more in some cases. So yes, we only have 15, but because of the weighted value, we actually have 17 EPDs. So what does all of this mean? Well, in order to get the 1 point that we talked about, we need a minimum of 20 EPDs. So the project team would need to add more materials with varying weighted values to get a minimum of 20 products for 1 point. So in my example, we still don't get 1 point yet. There's also an option 2 under this credit. It's where EPDs are optimized or assessed. This is beyond a manufacturer creating an EPD. It's asking manufacturers to look at their life cycle assessment and ask how they can reduce their environmental impacts. Showing that reduction or having a plan to reduce impacts in place will result in contribution to additional points under the environmental product declaration. There is an additional point available. However, it's still very new to pursue this option 2, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it right now. Just know that there's an option 2 for reducing embodied carbon and having an action plan in place to reduce environmental impacts. This is the next credit we'll talk about, is materials and resources, or MR credit for sourcing of raw materials. The intent of this credit is to reward project teams for selecting products verified to have been extracted or sourced in a responsible manner. This is the credit language from version 4.1. Version 4 had additional options. It was worth an additional point. It was difficult to achieve, so it was eliminated from version 4.1, and they added that other point that they removed in the previous version to this option. There are some slight differences in weighted value of each of these, but nothing really worth mentioning as far as changes go between version 4 and 4.1. So now the credit language reads to use 3 different manufacturers, and 15% by cost of the criteria below has to be met. Or for an additional point, use 5 different manufacturers and 30% by cost of the criteria should be met. And the criteria is the bullets, or on the right there, I have bullets as well. The extended producer responsibility is a criteria under this credit. And it refers to products purchased from a manufacturer that participates in a take-back program, as an example. So carpet manufacturers have take-back programs for carpet, in which they recycle their materials into the manufacturing process and create new carpet products based on what was returned to them. Bio-based materials, these are materials that have some percentage of bio-based materials, either from plant or animal derived. Wood products certified by FSC, or Forest Stewardship Council. There's an option to reuse materials and recycle content, which I'll talk about in more detail. First, I'll explain what by cost means. It means that you need the materials cost of each product or material purchased, and this excludes equipment and labor. And second question I get all the time, my product has greater than 30% recycled content. Do I get the point? No. Another question, what if 100% of my millwork is certified by Forest Stewardship Council? Do I still get a point? No, still no. 15% or 30% requirements are the sum of all products on this BPDO calculator, not individual products, recycled content, or FSC percentages. So Using products with recycled content results in lower environmental impacts when compared to using raw materials. Recycled content refers to the portion of materials used in a product that have been diverted from the solid waste stream. Increasing recycled content lowers environmental impacts. This should not be confused with the MR credit for construction waste management. This credit has nothing to do with throwing out packaging or unused products in the correct dumpsters on a construction site. This criteria is specific to the recycled content within a product. Pre-consumer refers to diverting materials from the manufacturing or during the manufacturing process. And post-consumer refers to materials diverted after consumer use. Some products have third-party certification for recycled content. However, it's not necessary to have third-party certification for this sustainable attribute. A manufacturer's letter or a manufacturer's report will suffice. Here is the sourcing of raw materials tab on the BPDO calculator. On the far left, we have the same 21 products as the last example. In the middle, starting with the extended producer responsibility. Actually, let me just go back here so you can see it. We can see that there are a lot less sustainable attributes in these cells than there was in the last example. Again, that's okay. Not every product is going to meet every credit's requirements. They're not intended to. However, the more sustainable attributes or certifications you have, the merrier. This credit, again, is based on cost. LEED has a calculator, which I will share. This calculator is for recycled content, specifically in this example. Recycled content's equation is post-consumer plus half of pre-consumer. So for example, MAPEI's ultralight mortar has 23.9% post-consumer recycled content and 8.6% pre-consumer recycled content. In the equation there, we see that ultralight mortar has a total recycled content percentage of 28.2. That value is then multiplied by the material cost. In my example, I put that the project team had $10,000 in ultralight mortar product. And so that material cost times 28.2, I get 2,820. LEED in this example is showing 2,821. Not sure how they got that, but we will take the $1 because we need every dollar we can get to the thresholds that we need. You don't have to know this calculation. LEED will do all of this information. They will calculate all of this for you on their calculator. I'm just trying to explain how they come up with the numbers that they get. So from starting with the material cost, plugging in recycled content in this case, and then how they get to this sustainable criteria value. This entire spreadsheet is just plugging in information provided by manufacturers, and it gets totaled on the far right. The next MR credit that we're going to talk about is the materials ingredients credit. The intent of this credit is to reward project teams for selecting products for which chemical ingredients in the product are inventoried using an accepted methodology, and for selecting products verified to minimize the use and generation of harmful substances. The credit approach is similar to the EPD credit that I mentioned earlier. Project teams must use 20 different permanently installed products sourced from at least 5 different manufacturers that meet one of the listed material ingredients reports below. There is an exception for projects pursuing LEED for core and shell or LEED for warehouses and distribution centers. As you can imagine, they're just a box or a shell. So it is difficult for those project teams to achieve 20 EPDs or 20 material ingredient reports. So under this version 4.1, LEED has made it a little easier for corn shell and warehouse and distribution centers to achieve the points in that they can use 10 products from 3 manufacturers if they meet the credit criteria for corn shell. Where this credit differs from the EPD credit is that all of the material ingredient reports are valued as the same product or as one product. When we talked about EPDs, the values of EPDs varied based on the type of EPD. We saw an industry-wide or product-specific EPDs varied in value. That's not the case on the material ingredients credit. There are many types of material ingredient reports, but again, they're all valued the same. Most are familiar with HPDs or health product declarations or declare labels. However, there are at least 7 other types of material ingredient reports that LEED accepts. A material ingredient report is exactly what it sounds like. It's a report of the ingredients in a material. This is a transparency document that shows the ingredients in a product and all of their associated hazards. Currently, there are no baselines that a product or material has to be compared against, good, bad, or ugly. They're just ingredients. They just have to be listed. Whether they're right or wrong, they contribute to the points. So similar to an EPD, a material ingredient report could have the worst possible impacts and would still contribute. And here's an example of a material ingredient report. In this case, it is a manufacturer inventory. And you can see a breakdown of a product, its role, the hazard category, and some information on how it contributes to LEED or other green building programs. This particular manufacturer inventory is third-party verified. I can tell, or you will be able to tell, based on that stamp in the top right corner. So Green Circle Certified is a third party. They have reviewed, in this case, MAPEI's Primer SN Fast product. They've reviewed the ingredients, its role, and the hazards, and verified that we've provided all of the information needed to have this transparency document. We do get third-party verification. It is optional, but MAPEI does go through third-party assessment and verification by Green Circle because it holds us accountable and avoids greenwashing, which we don't want. And also because of MAPEI's third-party verification efforts, it's also a bonus for customers. These third-party verified material ingredient reports are worth 1.5 products under LEED version 4, and I'll explain that next. So here again is the BPDO calculator. This is the material ingredients tab of the BPDO. On the far left, we have the 21 products that are in this example. Under option 1, this case we've identified, let's see, 5 material ingredient reports. Again, not every product is going to have a material ingredient report, and that's okay. Now all of the material ingredient reports are worth the same, so manufacturer inventory is the same value as a declare label. They're showing that we have 5 reports. However, where you can gain additional products is if a material ingredient report is third-party verified. So of the 21 products that we have listed in this first column, 5 of them have a material ingredient report, but because some are third-party verified, we actually have a total of 7 material ingredient reports for this to contribute to the LEED point. Unfortunately, they still have to have a minimum of 20 material ingredient reports in order to get the 1 point under new construction, or if they're pursuing core and shell, they would need 10 products total based on the weighted value of the third-party verification or not. There's also a new option under the material ingredient credit. Option 2 is where the material ingredient reports are optimized or assessed. This is beyond a manufacturer creating a material ingredient report. It asks manufacturers to ask themselves, how can we reduce health impacts? What are alternative ingredients that are available to reformulate our products for healthier materials? Showing better hazard scores or having a plan in place will result in contribution to additional points under this material ingredient credit option 2. It requires that project teams use at least 5 permanently installed products sourced from 3 manufacturers. This is still very new, so beyond explaining this today, I don't have an example on the calculator, as this is a very new concept for manufacturers, and I think in the near future you will start to see more and more manufacturers participating in this option too. But for right now, it's not easily achieved. Under past versions of LEED, there was a regional manufacturing credit. It was its own credit. Things changed under version 4. LEED version 4 or 4.1's local criteria changed. So products sourced, which means they're extracted, manufactured, and purchased within 100 miles of the project site, are valued at twice their base contributing cost or number of products, up to a max of 20% or 2 products. I promise I will explain what that means. Nothing locally sourced earns any credit unless it has another completely unrelated attribute, such as recycled content or an EPD or a material ingredient report to claim. So for example, a flooring adhesive that has recycled content and is 95% locally sourced, which means it was extracted and manufactured within 100 miles of the project site, that product receives credit for its recycled content. However, even if it's 95% local, they get 0 credit for it being 95% local, because it has to be 100% of the product must be local. That changed. So in older versions of LEED, it used to be a 500-mile radius, and they did give credit for the percentage, a percentage of the product being locally sourced. I will tell you, unfortunately, MAPEI will not contribute to LEED's regional criteria. The language under version 4.1 is near impossible to achieve. And LEED reviewers are smart. They know the origin of products or materials, and they will call you out on items such as local materials if they know, the origin of typical product types and that they're not within 100 miles of the site. And then on the BPDO calculator, there's a column on each of the credits that we discussed. You may have seen it. It's a simple yes or no. Does the entire product meet local criteria? Yes. If it's yes, for example, on the left, you can see that the product specific type 3 EPD becomes 2 products, which is the max. And on the right, in the other example, you can see that the sustainable criteria value doubles if yes is selected for local criteria. So 2 times or 200% of the cost is achieved if 100% of the product is achieved within a 100-mile radius. So that brings us through the MR credits. And now we're going to look at indoor environmental quality, or IEQ credit category, specifically the credit for low emitting materials. The intent of this credit is to reduce concentrations of chemical contaminants that can damage air quality and the environment, and to protect health and productivity and comfort of installers and building occupants. Project teams must use materials on the building interior, so that's everything within the waterproofing membrane, should meet the low emitting criteria here. There are 8 categories in this credit. There are up to 4 categories related to flooring and floor setting materials. The obvious category there, flooring. This category includes all types of hard and soft surface flooring. So carpet, ceramic, vinyl, rubber, engineered solid wood laminates, raised floors, wall base, underlayments, and other floor coverings that I didn't mention. In this category, 90% of flooring should either be inherently non-emitting or show that the product has been tested according to the California Department of Health CDPH standard method version 1.2 -2017. What does inherently non-emitting mean? It means it's a product that is sourced, it's VOCs, such as in stone or ceramic or powder coated metals, plated or anodized metal, glass, concrete, clay, brick, and has no binders, surface coatings, or sealants that include organic chemicals. So ceramic tile, you would just simply have to check a box that says the product is inherently non-emitting, and you wouldn't have to go through the effort of finding VOC emissions certification testing unless one's been done. Wood subflooring is included in the composite wood category. You have to meet the composite wood category requirements, which states that 75% of composite wood, including wood subflooring, meets the formaldehyde emissions evaluation, showing that a product is certified as ultra low emitting formaldehyde, or ULEF, and or certified as having no added formaldehyde. And for floor coatings or wet applied products applied to the floor, those are included in the paints and coatings category. To meet paints and coatings category, 75% of products in this category must comply with VOC content requirements under South Coast Air Quality Management District, or SQAMD, Rule 1113, and show the product has been tested according to CDPH, California Department of Health Standard Method version 1.2. For those of you who are familiar with version 4 of the LEED reference guide, you may be looking at these percentage requirements and saying, wait a minute, I know they're higher. They are higher in version 4 if project teams pursue version 4.1, and you can do it by substituting a credit, a 4.1 credit for a version 4 credit. You don't have to register as 4.1 to pursue 4.1. You can take advantage of the smaller percentages required to show compliance. I think paints and coatings, for example, 90% of paints and coatings had to comply, and I believe it was 100% of flooring had to comply. And so as manufacturers were catching up, it was difficult for project teams to be able to show compliance while everybody was trying to play catch up with the new version of LEED. And the last category I'll spend time on today is the adhesives and sealants category, very similar to paints and coatings. 75% of sealants and adhesives, including flooring adhesives and sealants, must comply with VOC content requirements under SQAMD Rule 1168 and provide proof of CDPH compliance. So points are awarded based on the number of categories that were achieved. Project teams must meet the requirements of 2 of these categories for 1 point. The more product categories they achieve, the more points they can get. If you meet 4 product categories, you meet the max points allotted for low emitting materials. If you achieve 5 categories, you achieve the maximum points allotted plus an optional bonus point or exemplary performance point. There's also an option if you meet 90% or greater in these categories. Again, under version 4, that was difficult, and now they've added it in as a point option. And now I'll explain everything I just said as far as VOC emissions and content goes. So I mentioned VOC content and emissions and a few other acronyms on the last slide. There are a few requirements to contribute to low emitting materials credit. First, limit VOC content. Content is as simple as it sounds, the content of VOCs in a product, or how much of the product is VOCs. The content of VOCs in a product can vary. It's important to evaluate, select, and install building materials that minimize exposure to VOCs. There are regulations in place that limit VOCs in a product. So South Coast Air Quality Management District has the most stringent VOC regulations in the US. And I mentioned SQAMID Rule 1113 or 1168. A product's VOC content must be less than or equal to the limits that are set in these rulings. Second, VOC emissions testing and certification are required for some of the credit categories I mentioned, specifically adhesives and sealants, paints and coatings, and flooring. VOC emissions is just the VOC content that evaporates into the air. So they're two different things. VOC emissions are present in higher levels indoors and primarily originate from building materials or products. Emissions determine what installers and end users really breathe in. And manufacturers can voluntarily choose to have products tested for emissions. Building products must be tested and determined in compliance with CDPH, as I mentioned. And there are several third-party testing and certifying bodies that provide VOC emissions, including UL Green Guard, FloorScore, Berkeley Analytical, CRI Green Label Plus, and SCS Indoor Advantage Gold. Here's an example of VOC content on the left. It's found, VOC content is typically found on TDS or SDS. And on the right, there is a third-party VOC emission certification that you would gather as part of documentation for projects pursuing green building certification. MAPEI has over 400 products that have undergone testing and certification showing CDPH compliance. So we have a lot of these third-party certifications on the right. And there's yet another calculator for low emitting materials. This one is separate from the calculator that we talked about for the MR credits. There are tabs for each of the 8 categories we talked about. So pulling the products from the other calculator that I use as examples there, project teams also have to list all products under this category under their under this calculator under their applicable category. This is the paints and coatings category, or the paints and coatings tab. This spreadsheet shows what's being asked of project teams and manufacturers to show compliance. So option 1 that you see for criteria met means that VOC emissions show compliance with CDPH standard. Option 2 is for international standards. You also have to show compliance with VOC content, so showing SQAMID Rule 1113, and then selecting the product type. And then once you select the product type, this LEED calculator auto-populates that ruling VOC limit for that type of product. So next you need to verify whether or not the VOC content is less than the auto-populated VOC content and mark it as yes or no. There is an adhesives and sealants tab, pretty much the same thing as paints and coatings, except you're comparing VOC content limits to South Coast Air Quality Management District Rule 1168 for adhesives and sealants. There are many product types. You can select the best or closest option to what you're using that product for. And flooring, there's another tab for flooring, and you're confirming compliance with VOC emissions only. No VOC content information is required for flooring itself. So all of the tabs on this low emitting calculator are summarized on this product category summary tab. I just showed you examples of paints and coatings, adhesives and sealants, and flooring. And I also showed some products did not meet the criteria in my examples. All of this information is summarized here and shows what categories are in compliance and those that are not. That's why it's very important to select products that have sustainable attributes or certifications. It's important to select products and confirm their use of these products before installation. One product can make or break an entire category's compliance, and you don't want to be that one person or that one company or that one installer that ruins it for the whole team. LEED also has the last credit that we'll talk about today under LEED is the LEED pilot credit titled MRPC, Certified Multi-Attribute Products and Materials, and that includes a section specific to tile and tile setting materials. The intent of this credit is to encourage the use of products and materials for which life cycle information is available. This pilot credit gives credit to project teams that use products from manufacturers who have achieved another third-party certification that's not listed under the MR credits that we talked about or under the low emitting credit that we talked about. There are various options under this credit. The one specific to tile and tile setting materials is called Green Squared. In order to contribute to Green Squared requirements, project teams should select tile and tile setting materials that have Green Squared certification and specifically have achieved a couple of requirements under the Green Squared standard. So LEED requires that a product have an LCA or an EPD as a minimum. And this is an optional credit under the Green Squared certification. And in order to qualify for this pilot credit, LEED also requires that the product have some recycled content, and there are minimum thresholds that have to be met. In this case, if you pursue this pilot credit for tile and tile setting materials, it doesn't mean that you can't use carpet or vinyl or other flooring types on this project. This is just a credit that's available specific for tile and tile setting materials. It's a Green Squared as a multi-attribute standard. It's a certification that looks at environmental, social, and health impacts. It was drafted by Tile Council of North America, or TCNA, and submitted to ANSI for further development and finalization. Again, this standard sets the bar for technical specification of sustainable tiles and tile installation materials. And here's an example of the documentation that you would provide, which is a Green Squared certification. LEED also asks manufacturers to provide a Green Squared checklist showing proof the required Green Squared credits were achieved. Next section is products for LEED projects. So specifications, that's what we're seeing here. So selecting products with sustainable attributes requires research and critical evaluation. A wealth of sustainable information is available and continues to be developed pertaining to green products. The key is to start with green building certification system being pursued, after which the project team should educate themselves on the sustainable attributes that are needed to meet that certification system's goals and find products that meet those requirements. Ask the project team questions. Ask if the project is pursuing green building certification. What credits is the project pursuing? Are there specifications that show anything about sustainability? If they do have specifications, review 018113. It's a sustainable design requirements section, and typically it will tell you which green building certification the project is pursuing. Your spec section should also have sustainable information. So in this example here, 093000, This section further details the attributes or certifications the product can have. So based on these specifications here, let's see if I can click, there we go. I can tell that the project is pursuing LEED version 4 Gold and the Well Building Standard, which is a conversation for a different day. They're pursuing sourcing of raw materials credit. So they're asking for recycled content information where applicable. We talked about that earlier. And they're asking for low emitting material information, which as we learned means that they're asking for VOC content and VOC emissions information for all flooring adhesive sealants and coatings used in this spec section. This spec section is a little dated. The correct CDPH standard should be standard method version 1.2-2017. They're also asking for EPDs and a form of material ingredient reporting. Oh, let me go back here for a minute. So that's one credit, or that's one specification section. Every spec section is different. Every MR credit that we talked about today, or low emitting contributions are different per spec section. So it's really important to read what the architect or what the project team is asking of you specific to your project needs. Will every product meet these specifications? Most likely no. It's best to work with a project team and the manufacturer to find the best product or products for the project or find alternatives. Sometimes instead of specifications, we get forms such as this one. This is a LEED submittal cover sheet. Typically, the architect provides this to the GC to have subs fill these out, which means that subcontractors typically send these to manufacturers to fill out. These cover sheets are filled out by someone on the project team, and they're all assembled. One person on the project team will take the assembled list of cover sheets and fill out the LEED calculators that we talked about today. And they'll also identify products or materials that may need to be substituted for a greener product. You hope in an ideal or a perfect world, this is being done before installation. So now the fun part. Finding products that have these sustainable attributes or certifications. Finding this information on manufacturers' websites can be daunting and a big pain. I've been there, I understand the struggle. So where do you begin? Well, I can't speak for other manufacturers, but I can tell you that MAPEI has over 400 of these sustainable product reports that you're seeing. It's a 2-page document that discloses each product's sustainable attributes and certifications. Currently, a single MAPEI product can have up to 7 sustainable attributes or certifications. Majority of these sustainable attributes or credential or certifications will relate to LEED. Others are specific to other green building standards. You can use these reports to complete LEED calculators that we talked about today, or the LEED cover sheets that we talked about today. On this report, we have links to VOC emissions and content needed for LEED IEQ credit 2, our low emitting materials credit that we talked about today. So this report provides a link to our TDS to pull VOC content. We also provide a link to VOC emission certification and a list. It lists the TVOC range. We also list the product type for your calculators. There's links to our material ingredient reports and our EPDs. Also under the EPD section, we tell you whether or not it's product specific or industry wide. If applicable, recycled content will be shown. There's a link to request product manufacturing locations. Again, unfortunately, under LEED's current requirements, MAPEI products do not meet the regional criteria, but there are other green building standards that have less stringent requirements for regional material. There's also a link to our green squared certification that we talked about. And also on this report, we include links to the product page on our website, a link to the mindful materials page that I'll talk about, as well as a link to our website sustainability page, our sustainability email address, and a link to applicable products verified for LEED documentation, which I will talk about too. First, where do you find these reports? There are many options. You can visit our website. Under the About Us section, we have a Health and the Environment section for general information on our commitment to sustainability and information about the attributes or certifications our products have. Jen mentioned that at the beginning. Also under the tools and downloads section, our product information library has a filtering option. I like to filter by sustainability product reports so you can see all of the product sustainable attributes or certifications rather than each type that's listed there. And also under each applicable product page, we also have product reports and other sustainable attributes or certifications available for download. Also under our About Us section, there's a corporate sustainability report. On that report, we include a how-to guide for reading the sustainability product report that I talked about. And I mentioned mindful materials a few slides back. If you're not familiar with mindful materials, they're a third-party product information library. It's free to use and free to sign up. MAPEI sponsors and contributes to mindful materials site. So all of our products' sustainable attributes or certifications can be found in mindful materials. Essentially, the point of this library is for project teams to be able to design and build a building using this database or this library and select the greenest products applicable for their project. So on the left-hand side of this library, you can filter by spec section, manufacturer, various green building programs, including LEED and other green product certifications to filter out the best product for your project. And each product page on Mindful Materials has our sustainable attributes or certifications available for download as well. And also, last but not least, I mentioned verified for LEED documentation. This is a document that's specific to LEED. You can't use it on any other green building project or standard that you may be pursuing. Our sustainability product reports also include a link to the verified for LEED documentation. We have several products that have been verified for LEED at MAPEI. We work with GBCI, which is the Green Business Certification Inc. And we work with them and USGBC to verify that our product's sustainable attributes and certifications are LEED compliant. So essentially our products are pre-verified for project teams. So project teams don't have to verify MAPEI's claims. They just name drop our product and they're auto approved or speed up the review process as LEED reviewers can skip reviewing our products knowing that they're already pre-verified and approved. You may have seen this column on the BPDO calculator or the low emitting calculator that I had up earlier. All you have to do is provide a GBCI ID, and that's available in the report, which is available in our sustainability product reports. If a product has been verified for LEED documentation, project teams just add this ID and can skip providing backup documentation. It's meant to save time for project teams and LEED reviewers. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions, or you can email us your questions as well. Are there any questions?
Hey, Brittany, can you hear me?
I can.
Hi. Sorry, I'm sitting here talking, and I guess I was on mute.
No problem.
Yeah, we actually do have a few questions. Sorry about that. And I'll
No
give
worries.
people some time to type in some more. You were talking to yourself there. Sorry.
No worries.
So, the first question is about red list chemicals
Mhm.
and what lead credit covers the red list.
That's a good question. I, we did not talk about red list today, or I did not mention the red list. Though you might have seen the red list logo on our sustainability product reports. The red list represents the worst in class materials or chemicals with known health hazards. Red list chemicals are banned or prohibited on living building challenge projects, which is separate green building standard to LEED. LEED does not state a building can't use chemicals like living building challenge does. You often do see red list mentioned on the MR credit for material ingredient reports. Um, However, you can't get credit, or it's not enough documentation to provide a red list letter under LEED. You have to provide an actual transparency document showing material ingredients.
All right. That's that's a lot of documentation that you're responsible for. Boy, I'm so glad that you have that form. Um, Another question, do I have to list every flooring type, color, and adhesive used? Speaking of needing a lot of documentation.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. You have to list every product with a unique function or color or manufacturer, and the more you can describe the product, the better. The examples that I showed in the webinar are just a few examples, but these spreadsheets that I showed are pretty lengthy on new construction projects, for example. I know in my time on working on LEED projects, you'd see upwards of 40 or 50 line items listing every product. The more products that you can list that contribute to the various credits that we talked about today, the more the quicker you can achieve the point or points that you're pursuing. There are some products that only meet one LEED credit, and you should still list it because every little bit helps. These calculators are organized to address credit-specific compliance. So, um, you know, whether they comply or not, they need to be listed. The LEED reviewers will call out, for example, if you list ceramic tile, but they don't see a ceramic tile adhesive, they will come back to you and say, okay, I know there's more to it than just tile. Please provide the information. So it's best to be as descriptive as possible upfront, so you're not scrambling at the end of the project to then have to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, makes good sense. Well, we are a little bit over time, and I know that everybody's time is very, very crucial these days. So I'm going to conclude now, and thank you, Brittany, for a really excellent webinar, and thank you, everybody, for spending some time with us today. If there are any further questions, I know there was a lot of information. You can always send them to us at mapeidigital@mapei.com. We check that quite frequently. Also, if there are any topics that you'd like us to explore, please send them to us at that email, mapeidigital@mapei.com, and we'll definitely consider those. And again, please do visit our website, especially the health and environment pages, as Brittany showed you. They contain so much useful information. So this will conclude today's MAPEI online webinar. And thanks again, Brittany. And thank you again, everybody. And we'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.